A blockbuster deal for Airbus. The aerospace giant has inked a multi-billion-dollar sale. It's building new jets for AirAsia. The Prime Minister says the momentum for Quebec and the country is huge.
Airbus Canada has announced a massive deal to supply AirAsia with 150 of its Canadian-made A220 jets.
Canada is once again building big at home and creating reliable partnerships abroad, including very much with ASEAN. So Tony, thank you. Thank you for the trust you're placing in Canadian workers.
Two aircraft deals, two world leaders, two radically different strategies, and the gap between them might be the most revealing economic story of the year so far. Here are the two numbers you need to hold in your head right from the start. 200 Boeing jets, announced by Donald Trump on Fox News while flying home from Beijing. No aircraft type confirmed. No delivery schedule. No statement from Boeing. No statement from China. 150 A220 jets, signed by AirAsia, inside a Canadian factory in Mirabel, Quebec. Firm contract, $19 billion at list price. Deliveries begin 2028. By the time this video ends, you will understand exactly why that contrast matters, and why the quieter deal may define the next decade of North American economic strategy. Welcome back to Global Sketch, and if you are new here, subscribe right now, because today we are breaking open a story that most major newsrooms completely missed. On May 14, 2026, Donald Trump landed in Beijing for his first state visit to China since 2017. He brought with him the most concentrated assembly of American corporate power to visit that country in years. In his delegation, the CEO of Boeing, the CEO of Apple, the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, the CEO of BlackRock, and the head of Citigroup. This was not a diplomatic trip. It was a sales mission, and the product they wanted to sell most was Boeing sitting with Fox News host Sean Hannity inside the Great Hall of the People. Trump said Xi Jinping had agreed that very day to order 200 jets. He said Boeing had only asked for 150, and that he personally pushed the number to 200 big ones. That is a lot of jobs. And then the market reacted. Boeing shares fell nearly 4% in afternoon trading, their biggest single session drop in months. Why? Because professional investors had been modeling something much larger. Bloomberg had reported negotiations involving up to 500 narrow-body 737 MAX jets. Reuters sourced similar figures. Aviation finance firm IBA estimated the value of a 200 aircraft order at roughly $17 to $19 billion, with a potential upside to $25 billion. If wide-body jets were included, prediction markets had placed an 82% probability on a major Boeing announcement before the plane even touched down. When the number came in at 200 with zero specifics, no aircraft model named, no delivery timeline, no airline identified, no confirming statement from Boeing or from the Chinese government, the market read it as a disappointment dressed up as a win. Aviation expert Lee Hamming put the underlying problem plainly: nobody wants to buy a product without guaranteed after-sales support as recently as May 2025. Washington was still threatening export restrictions on aircraft parts. That level of political uncertainty does not vanish because a president announces a number in a television interview. To understand why that reaction happened, you have to understand what Boeing lost in China across the past decade. The freeze started with the global grounding of the 737 MAX, following two fatal crashes in 2018 and 2019. It deepened through years of trade tension, and in April 2025, Boeing itself disclosed in an SEC filing that certain Chinese customer had told the company they would not accept aircraft deliveries. Between 2018 and the start of this year, Boeing delivered just over 100 aircraft to Chinese customers in total, roughly what it was delivering to China in a single year at its peak. While Boeing sat frozen out, Airbus did not wait in 2019 alone. China placed a single order for 300 Airbus jets. Multiple large orders followed by 2,026. Airbus held a 56% global market share compared to Boeing's 40%. In the first quarter of 2025, Airbus produced 110 aircraft, Boeing produced 63. And in October 2025, a milestone arrived that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. The Airbus A320 family officially overtook the Boeing 737 as the single most delivered jetliner in the history of commercial aviation. 12,260 cumulative deliveries. The aircraft that was supposed to be Boeing's crown had been dethroned. China is projected to need 9,500 new commercial aircraft over the next 20 years. That is the second largest demand pool on the planet. Boeing being excluded from that market is not a quarterly problem, it is an existential competitive threat, and that is the depth of the hole that 200 jets with details to follow is supposed to begin filling. Now rewind 8 days. May 6, 2026, a working assembly hangar in Mirabel, Quebec, just north of Montreal. Mark Carney walks in alongside Quebec Premier Christine Frechette, Airbus Commercial Aircraft CEO Lars Wagner, and Tony Fernandez, the co-founder and advisor of AirAsia, one of the largest low-cost airline groups in the world. Every one of those aircraft will be assembled in Mirabel. Not in France, not in Germany. In Quebec by Canadian workers. The facility currently employs nearly 5,000 workers, 2,500 of them hired in just the past 4 years. The production target is now 13 aircraft per month by early 2028. The A220 has a complicated Canadian history. It was designed by Bombardier as the C-Series. Bombardier nearly went bankrupt building it. Quebec poured $1 billion into the program to save it in 2018. Bombardier handed the entire program to Airbus, essentially for nothing, at the time that was called a defeat for Canadian aerospace. 8 years later, that same program, now under European ownership on a Canadian assembly line, just received the largest order in its history. The aircraft Canada, once nearly lost, has become the aircraft Canada is now selling to Asia. Here is the layer most coverage completely missed. This deal did not come from nowhere. It is the product of a deliberate strategic sequence. In January 2026, Mark Carney became the first Canadian Prime Minister in nearly a decade to visit Beijing. He met with Xi Jinping. He met with Premier Li Qiang. He signed a strategic partnership covering trade, energy, and aerospace. China explicitly committed in that agreement to exploring Canadian investment in aerospace and advanced manufacturing. From that same visit, he secured a preliminary deal to slash Chinese tariffs on Canadian canola seed from a combined rate of roughly 85% down to around 15%, unlocking approximately $3 billion in Canadian export orders. He also set a national target to grow Canadian exports to China by 50% by the year 2030. The Beijing visit happened in January, 4 months before Trump flew to China with the Boeing CEO and his delegation. 4 months before Carney was there first, he met the same leaders. He sat in the same rooms, and he was there with a strategy that did not depend on a single press conference to determine whether it had succeeded. Let us put both deals side by side using only verified data. Aircraft count: 200 Boeing versus 150, 220 firm, with options for 150 more. A potential 300 total from a single customer contract status. The Boeing deal was announced as agreed in principle. Neither Boeing nor the Chinese government issued a confirming statement. The A220 deal is a firm signed contract, confirmed simultaneously by Airbus AirAsia and the Government of Canada aircraft. Type Trump's announcement unspecified Carney's deal, a A220-300 publicly documented in an official Airbus press release delivery timeline. Trump's deal not provided. Carney's deal first delivery, Q1 2028, with the assembly line already running. Jobs Trump's announcement included no jobs figure. Carney's deal supports 5,000 workers at Mirabel alone, plus 850 Canadian suppliers. Nationwide announcement method. Trump a Fox News interview at 30,000 feet. Carney a formal ceremony inside the operating factory, with joint press releases from 4 parties issued the same day. These are not two versions of the same story. They are two different models of economic statecraft. And the scorecard right now is not what the headlines are suggesting. There are genuine open questions on both sides of this story. Boeing still needs to turn Trump's Beijing announcement into a firm purchase agreement with named Chinese airlines on a confirmed delivery schedule. Trump signaled that Xi Jinping may visit Washington in September, which would become the focal point for the next wave of potential orders. If those 200 jets firm up and the follow-on 750 jet promise eventually materializes, it would be transformative for Boeing American aerospace workers genuinely needed. But the history of Chinese aircraft commitments tied to diplomatic visits is a history of headlines that did not always survive the next political cycle. In January 2020, Beijing pledged to purchase $77 billion in U.S. goods, including aircraft, as part of the Phase 1 trade deal. Then the pandemic arrived, the political climate shifted, and the commitment quietly disappeared. Meanwhile, in Mirabel, the assembly line is not waiting for a press release. It is running. The supply chain is moving. The first AirAsia aircraft is scheduled for delivery in early 2028. And Tony Fernandez has already said publicly that if Airbus launches a stretched A220-500 variant, AirAsia will buy another 150. That would bring the total potential from a single customer to 450 aircraft. Here is the global sketch bottom line. If this breakdown gave you something, the headlines did not then subscribe to Global Sketch. This is exactly the kind of story. We are here to tell Drop Your Take. In the comments, I read every single one. See you in the next one.